Hello, everyone, and welcome to this podcast for the GE Careers Conference. Very excited today because we're going to be talking about music, and I'm joined very kindly by Harriet, who's a professional pianist. She's been giving lunchtime concerts out of her window during the lockdown. She's based in London at the moment, but she travels internationally as well, and she's spent time living in New York. We're going to be talking about her career in music, which I believe has started since she's very young, and also how her time at Christ Hospital has helped her on that journey as well. So hello, Harriet.
Hi, lovely to be here.
Thanks so much.
I remember these conferences from when we used to go and listen to guest speakers when I was, deputy, and I really enjoyed it. It was so lovely to have somebody come kind of from off campus and learn about things that you never normally would have necessarily had access to, and they were really fun. Really enjoyed it.
It is great, and I think, I'm sure that students will really enjoy hearing from you, because it's very difficult to find musicians, to pin down musicians, because you're always travelling and doing various engagements all the time. So it's great. Let's start off then by just talking briefly about your career. If you could just tell us, give us a brief summary of what you do.
Yeah. So I started performing when I was 3. And touring from when I was about 4. And from then, I got a full scholarship to Guildford when I was 5, and completed all my grades when I was 7. And so I led a very full child career, sort of 60 concerts a year, until I was sort of about 13, 14. And then I really wanted to find a way to continue what I was doing that I had come to through my own adolescence and my own journey, and it was around that time that I went to Christ Hospital as well, and I really wanted to do music because I wanted to do it, not because it had been something that had been what I'd always done. And so Christ Hospital really gave me the opportunity to discover that I can do other things and that I was choosing to move forward and do this. But having the opportunity to do that was such a wonderful thing. And Christ Hospital really did change my life in giving me security and breadth and experience and support that I never would have had in such a way. So that's
really interesting for you to say, because coming to Christ Hospital, though there's lots of focus on music, obviously, it's quite different to, say, a music school where you would be given time to devote, say, 8 hours a day to practicing. So how did that have an impact on what the life you were kind of used to if you had been performing since you were 3 years old?
I think it was a welcome change. I think that I'd had very little opportunity to really explore much else other than what I was doing full time as a job, and to really interact with other people my age for extended periods of time. Even at Guildford, where I was at Saturday school and continued to be, I was still by far the youngest. So it wasn't really a peer group. I had a lot of friends, but it's not the same as interacting in boarding house and learning to live in that environment. And I really enjoyed learning that, learning new skills, learning the value of what a new skill is and how much that serves you in life and gives you tools to interact with so many more people and enjoy so many more aspects of life. And the value of skill, I think, is something that I really took away from Christ Hospital and love to this day. Do all sorts of other things outside of music that I enjoy because I learned how to value that. Yeah.
So where did life take you then after CH? How did you enter into a music career?
Well, I was going back, really, but I was going back with a fresh perspective. And I didn't end it entirely. I was still doing my concerts, but I wasn't practicing to the same amount, and I wasn't sure where I wanted to find my voice. And I think it was actually going to Glastonbury and hearing the Verve live that I really was like, oh my God, this is the whole that I've missed for so long, just live music and performing, and I can't really do anything else with my life that gives me that same amount of fulfillment and joy and purpose. And so I went and I did my undergrad in London, and then I decided when I was 6 that I was going to move to New York as an adult, and I did when I was 22, and I did my master's degree, and then I stayed on, and I've lived there ever since and kind of built a career in the States. So after my master's, I stayed on, I got a record deal, I got instrument representation, I became the board member of the Grammys. I didn't actually find, I think it's important to say this, I didn't find the masters to be the useful part. I found the masters a way of entering the States, but I moved very much away from the traditional classical music world of the Upper West Side and found my own voice, and was then retaken there for having done something interesting. But I chose to do something different with classical music. I wanted to put it in the sphere of people that weren't going to normally listen to it, because I felt that if I was going to dedicate my life to it, that I wanted to put it in spaces that it isn't. So the album that's currently out has Marianne Faithfull on it, reading William Blake over John Adams and Phrygian Gates. So it's about the relationship between revolution, rock and roll, the 60s, but also literature, and where classical music sits in that story. And the tours bring in musicians, but they also bring in actors, they bring in New York City Ballet, they bring in all sorts of things when we toured that album, the point being about the 3D vision of classical music. And then the album that I'm working on at the moment and putting out is with David Bowie's pianist Mike Garson, who did Aladdin Sane and all of his American concerts. That's about Bowie meets Rachmaninoff. Again, it's about placing it in that space that it hasn't been before. And the festival that I've just started in the Cayman Islands is the first ever stage built in the ocean. It's 100 feet offshore for 3,000 people. And I'm a dive master. I swim in the Arctic doing Harry migration research and stuff for fun. And I wanted to incorporate my love of the ocean and again, another kind of 3D aspect around classical music. So that's what really interests me.
Wow, it sounds like you've got a whole wide range of things going on. In terms of, I mean, you mentioned qualifications there briefly, and perhaps we'll come back to that later. But I mean, ultimately, I suppose you must need a wide range of skills. Let's talk about that briefly as a musician, because as well as playing the piano, obviously, you've got a record deal. You had to get that in some way. You must be relating to people a lot of the time. How important are your non-musical skills, would you say, in your career in terms of arranging things and managing things?
So critical. In a way, more important than your playing, in the sense that if you can play and you don't have anything else, you don't have a career, especially today, especially in a time, not just pre-pandemic even, but in a world where people expect content for free, and in a world where the attention span of your audience is so small. You don't have room to say, well, I do a very good job, so everyone has to come and knock on my door. It's just not a life that's available to anyone anymore,
Well, let's talk a bit about that then, because I mean, lots of students, I'm sure all our students will be familiar with things like Spotify and YouTube, obviously. I mean, there is so much arts content now available for free, and since the pandemic hit, even the National Theatre and South Bank Centre, etc., big orchestral names have been offering their live streaming for free. How does that have an effect on you as a musician? How do you manage with that?
I think that so if we talk about pre-pandemic and the availability of content, I think that the way that one consumes music has changed from an album and to a narrative and a story, to people creating their own stories via playlisting that they feel is relevant to that moment in their life and is recommended from other things they listen to, and it's just how the consumer experience is set up. So it's moved away from the physical product, which also means it's moved away from the ability to be a kind of 3D experience with album notes and showing everything else. It's something that comes on as a playlist because you were listening to something else, somebody else thought of it, but you don't really understand the context. And so I think the part that has to be added is context, and using it as an opportunity to say, okay, I'm going to communicate in sound bites to hold your attention and to make it accessible to you, but then how to transform that into somebody choosing to go and hear that live And that's really what your job is as a musician, and how you bring people along on that journey with you. And then going into the pandemic, and with everything being free, it's an extraordinary time that none of us saw coming, and so we're all making it up as we go along. I think that there's a level of importance in valuing what we put out for other people to value it too. So in that regard, the more we give away for free, the less it's valued. And so there has to be a balance struck of it being sustainable. And particularly because it was a struggle before, because people were no longer buying music in the same way, but live concerts was the way forward. Now, with the pandemic and whatever the musical landscape looks like after that, our priority is really trying to make sure that we have a way of continuing to give them that. And so one of the ways in which I'm really encouraged for our future is Patreon, where you have subscribers who sign up to various levels of membership. The thing that's particularly special about it during the pandemic is that it allows people to feel part of a community that you've created, rather than just scrolling through live streams of endless people continuing to post free content. You've chosen people that you want to hear from, and they've chosen you. So you are controlling that orbit in a way that you don't get to in social media, and it becomes much more personalized in a time which is so distant in so many ways.
That sounds really important. Well, let's move on. There's 3 questions now which students have actually chosen to put to our guests in these podcasts. So here's the first one. It is, what does your usual day at work look like? So let's do this pre-pandemic, as it were. Then before the pandemic, was there such thing as a usual day at work for you? What type of things do you spend your day doing?
No. Every single day is different, but every single day has imperatives that have to be met, which are all about self-discipline. So you have all the constants, but only you can create those constants, and creating those constants is part of the survival of being a freelance musician, I think. So a workout in every day, how much time you spend on your content management, what you spend on growth, and what you spend on what you're currently working on, and how you divide up your time, which is your time when you're not officially at work, but you are, because you are always at work. And if you're not always working, you're not going to have a career. Because if you've finished your whole day's work and you have an evening free, you shouldn't have an evening free. You should be at 6 different events meeting people. And if you're not, then it's only you that's going to lose out. Like, there is no such thing as a day off ever. And what each day looks like, I mean, I normally take 45 flights a year. I split my time between 4 places: New York, LA, Cayman, and London. And usually, so if I'm in LA, for example, I get up at 3:30 a.m. I work out, and then I start my first conference calls with the UK, and then that carries on for a very long time, because the end of the LA day is 6 or 7 p.m. So that's what you have to be willing to do all year round.
That sounds remarkably busy. What about practice time? Because, I mean, how much time do you still fit in for your personal practice?
Well, it depends on what you have going on. I think that in order to be in shape, it's a minimum of 3 a day, 3 hours a day, an hour on technique and 2 hours on whatever it is that you have going on. So at the moment, I'm actually needing to do a lot more than that, because I'm giving daily concerts, but also learning the repertoire for the new album, whilst also showcasing the album that's gone out already, whilst selling that at a concert. So 2 albums and another, and technique, plus extras that people ask for. That's 8 hours work a day. So there has to be a minimum that you cut out for yourself of 3 every day, ideally. And you treat that like a meeting, because if you start looking at your diary in a way, well, I've only got 1 meeting today, so actually I've got a day off and I'm going to go to the park, and then it doesn't work. You have to, it's in my diary like every other meeting, and it's not negotiable, because I can't turn up to the job and do it properly if I'm not in shape.
So it comes back to self-discipline, as you say, really. The next question, you've mentioned this already, is about qualifications. Now, with music particularly, lots of students will have worked their way up the grades. I think I've worked my way up the grades when I was younger as well. And they seem, when you're at school, very important. I mean, you obviously did them before you came to secondary school, amazingly. But what qualifications do you feel you've needed to get where you are today?
None of them. None of them. Not to say that I think that I don't mean to misrepresent that in that once you finish grade 8 and done a diploma, you've then reached ground zero, so you start there. Everything that you do after that, of course, you should explore and educate yourself in every single way possible, meet as many incredible musicians and educators across the field and learn. But has anyone ever asked me for my undergraduate degree? No. Has anyone ever asked my master's? No. They are interested in what you've done with what you've learned or why you've chosen to go somewhere. And it's increasingly more important to have a reason rather than a name attached, because it simply means less and less all the time.
Well, I suppose that links on to the last question which students have asked, which is about experiences. So have you had any particular experiences or, say, people you've met which have influenced your journey, so to speak?
So many. So many.
Can you give us an example of one or two?
I think so in terms of my playing and setting a foundation, I think Jimmy Gibb, who was Professor Emeritus at Guildhall, he never had taken a first child to Stoke. And he taught me so much about how to be a serious musician as a child that took me through life with a base of knowledge that most people don't even get at postgraduate level. So that was incredible. I'd say that Dr. Pagano, who I did a Master's Humanities elective in Genius and Madness and its relationships and it seemed, at the time like just an interest, but it actually influenced every decision I made after that and gave me support in a music hothouse environment and perspective, which is really important. Douglas Finch, again, my teacher at Trinity, was incredibly influential. But I think outside of just educators and institutions, I think the first record I made in New York was a big deal. I met Russ Teichman in Delhi, multi-Grammy award winning, and that changed my life. His whole life had been rock and roll and jazz and pop, and mine had been classical, and that taught me about the music industry where I thought I knew so much and knew nothing. Every time I've met somebody who's made me feel like I don't know anything at all has been the most enriching experience I've ever had. And you meet so many of those people, specifically in New York, which is why I remain there, because there's just that electricity and charm that's so special and teaches us all, to be humble and learn.
So the willingness to learn as well, I suppose. Finally then, would there be any particular word of wisdom or piece of advice that you would give to a student, say now, if they're 16, 17 and wanting to go on to do a career in music? I mean, music's so wide-ranging, it's very difficult to be specific, really, isn't it? But is there anything that you would want to say to yourself when you were 16, 17?
That the importance in what you're doing is actually for you before it's for anybody else. So it's about keep showing up for you. You're not showing up for other people, it's showing up for you. So you sit at the piano or whatever instrument it is that you do every day because you respect yourself and the time that you've already given to it to continue. And if you have that organic relationship with your instrument, it will always be your solace rather than your enemy. And not to compare yourself to anybody else, because especially now, even the social media situation changes every 6 months. You learn to do it and then it changes again. And so there is no point holding on to models of how other people have done it and trying to replicate them. The most powerful thing you can be is the truest to yourself and making that the most broad and impactful thing that the world has, and so that you can be the most honest and genuine artist that you can be.
Well, on those final words of inspiration, Harriet, thank you very much for giving up your time to do it. It doesn't sound like you've got a lot of free time, and really appreciate it. So thank you very much.